Stories about family values and love are often heard. But what if behind a seemingly perfect facade hides a nightmare that's hard to even imagine? Today's story is one of the most chilling cases in modern criminal history in the United States. In the quiet town of Springfield, Missouri, a drama unfolded that shook the entire world. An ordinary family, the Stauts, was hiding a terrifying secret. Behind the facade of a loving mother and dutiful daughter lurked two cold-blooded killers. When 24-year-old Sarah Stout was brought to the hospital with multiple organ failures, the doctors were baffled. A strange illness had already claimed the lives of her father, Mark, and her brother, Sean. But was it really an illness? An anonymous call from the local Lutheran church, where Diana Stout played the organ, prompted the police to start an investigation. The pastor was convinced that these deaths were no accident, and his suspicions turned out to be more than justified. This story has it all: betrayal, fear, money, and the most terrifying thing: when loved ones become the biggest danger. How did a mother and daughter organize a series of murders in their own family? Why did they choose their own relatives as victims? And how did the surviving sister cope with this betrayal? For the staff of the Springfield Medical Center in Missouri, USA, June 2013 turned out to be very stressful. When 24-year-old Sarah Stout was brought to the hospital, she was in poor condition. She was losing consciousness and screaming in pain when she came to. They discovered she had a brain hemorrhage and kidney failure. Her organs were shutting down and then sporadically starting to work again chaotically. The doctors couldn't figure out what was happening to the young patient who was fading away right before their eyes. The fight for Sarah's life went on for several days. Finally, the police arrived after receiving an anonymous call. Someone reported that the Stout family had been suffering from strange illnesses for a year that were claiming lives. First, Sarah's father, Mark, then her brother, Sean, both died without receiving medical help. Now it was Sarah's turn. The girl was much luckier since she ended up in the medical center. Otherwise, she would have already perished by now. The police began investigating the mysterious illness that had struck the Stout family. Detectives believed it wasn't a coincidence. This was a large family of 6 people. Mark and Diana were the parents of Sean and 3 daughters: Sarah, Rachel, and Brianna. Mark Stout was born in St. Louis in 1961 and was the head of this family. He met his future wife in Texas while studying at college. From the start, the young couple seemed like opposites, but they soon found common ground and started dating. Mark was always positive, creative, and played in a band. Whereas Diana appeared to be more complex, reserved, and introverted, their relationship developed quickly, and soon the girl became pregnant, leading them to decide to get married immediately. When Sean was born, Diana continued her studies, graduated from nursing school, and then worked in the cardiology department of a hospital. Meanwhile, Mark became a stay-at-home dad, taking care of the house and children. It seemed that the wife was more focused on career success. She worked hard to provide everything necessary for the family. The young mother was searching for a better-paying position, which required several relocations until the Stout family finally settled in Springfield, Missouri. It was a quiet town, perfect for raising children and family life. Moreover, it was Diana's hometown, a rather conservative and religious place where she felt most confident. In the following years, 3 girls were born into the marriage. On the surface, they seemed like the ideal family. Nevertheless, everything wasn't as smooth as it appeared. For instance, Sean suffered from health problems from an early age. During his school years, he was diagnosed with autism, requiring special conditions. Despite the efforts of the family patriarch, the girls also encountered difficulties in school, especially Sarah. However, even that wasn't the family's main challenge. They simply didn't have enough money for a decent life. With the growing family, one person could no longer manage to support everyone else. Besides, they needed to buy a new home because the old one no longer had enough space. Mark occasionally contributed to the family budget when he found some temporary work. Sometimes he worked as a bartender, but most of his time was devoted to the children. In his free time, he engaged in creativity, writing music, songs, and playing multiple musical instruments. Unsurprisingly, he began performing with his musical group. This also started bringing in some income, but it still wasn't enough for such a large family. Despite the problems, it seemed they were ready to overcome all difficulties together. At least that's how it looked until April 8, 2012. The police were called to the family's home the day after Mark's 61st birthday. Here they found the already cooling body of the man. According to his wife, he died from an unknown illness similar to the flu, which progressed rapidly and ended in a fatal seizure. Diana recounted that her husband had been suffering from an unknown illness for several days. She spent all her time with him to ease his pain. Nonetheless, Mark's condition kept worsening. The circumstances seemed strange. Even the body itself looked unusual. Specifically, the deceased man's skin was noticeably yellower than that of a healthy person. According to Diana, on the day of his death, a seizure occurred. Despite the fact that her husband had never experienced anything like it before, she believed it was related to his age. She claimed that when the seizure happened, she wanted to take Mark to the hospital, but he insisted on staying home to recover. Despite this, she ignored his wishes and started preparing. But by the time she was ready, she found her husband lifeless. 45 minutes had passed since the seizure, and she immediately called emergency services. After a quick examination, nothing suspicious was found. The cause of death was recorded as natural causes, citing the deceased's age. Sean, their son, was deeply worried about his father during this period. He even described all the symptoms his father suffered from on his social media page and doubted the natural cause of death. Diana insisted that her husband's body should be cremated. Afterward, his ashes were scattered over a local lake near the church. For everyone, Mark's death was a real shock. He was strong, healthy, and active. It was strange how suddenly he deteriorated. However, this incident didn't raise as many suspicions as the next tragedy that befell the Staudt family. 5 months later, on September 2, 2012, the police were called to another house under similar circumstances. It was a larger house that suited the family better. Diana had bought new property by selling the old house and receiving insurance payouts after her husband's death. Diana reported finding her 26-year-old son, Sean, dead in his room on that fateful day. The situation was similar to the progressive flu that her husband hadn't survived. This time, having had an unpleasant experience after her husband's death, she reacted quickly and took her son to the doctor on the second day after the symptoms appeared. They couldn't find anything suspicious except for water imbalance in his body. After that, Sean's condition continued to worsen, but his mother didn't take him back to the doctors. According to her, he refused medical help and felt uncomfortable. She justified this behavior due to his autism. The night before his death, Sean seemed to feel better. She assumed the unknown illness had subsided and went to church with her daughters to pray for Sean. He was just sleeping, but when they returned, he showed no signs of life. It seemed he tried to get up from the bed and fell, so he lay on the floor. A pool of blood flowed from his mouth. Sean's death shocked everyone. He worked at a center helping people with disabilities. Everyone described him as very positive and friendly. Like Mark, Sean was cremated, and his ashes were scattered over the lake. Before the next incident involving the family, 9 months had passed. Now in June 2013, the eldest daughter, Sarah, was hospitalized with similar symptoms that killed her brother and father. Police arrived at the hospital 2 days after the girl was admitted in critical condition. Doctors fought for her life, but couldn't tell the police anything specific. Doctors continued trying to determine the cause of the strange, flu-like illness. But it was strange that Sarah's kidneys and brain had failed. They conducted numerous tests, and though they didn't say it aloud, already suspected poisoning. As it turned out, the police were alerted by an anonymous call made from the church the family attended, where Diana had played the organ for many years. The pastor didn't believe these events were coincidental and feared the killer would escape justice, so he contacted the police. He expressed his suspicions that Sean's, Mark's deaths, and Sarah's critical condition were interconnected. According to the pastor, the first death, Mark's, seemed strange. He was healthy until the last moment. When Sean died under similar circumstances, the pastor seriously suspected Diana's involvement in these incidents. During this period, the woman told everyone her daughter was simply sick. At the same time, she behaved like a grieving widow and mother who had lost loved ones under mysterious circumstances, allowing her to receive full support from the religious community. However, the pastor believed Diana used this mask intentionally to avoid uncomfortable questions. When the woman visited her daughter in the hospital for the last time, she acted completely differently. Nurses recounted that she was in high spirits, even when she brought the dying Sarah to the hospital, joking and talking more about an upcoming trip to Florida than her daughter's health. All this happened despite the alarming forecast from the doctors, who weren't sure if the girl would survive this mysterious ailment. It seemed like the mother didn't care. All this only strengthened the authorities' suspicions about her. Still, they had nothing concrete to charge Diana with, so she was asked to voluntarily come to the station for questioning. She agreed. On June 20th, 2013, she appeared at the police department. By this point, Sarah's condition had stabilized slightly, but none of the tests conducted by the doctors showed any toxins or poisons in her system. It seemed like they had been completely processed and left no trace. Detectives understood they needed to carefully question the probable poisoner. The bodies of Sean and Mark had been cremated, making it impossible to exhume and conduct numerous tests, complicating the investigation into their deaths. Therefore, they hoped Sarah would survive and help the investigation. They wanted to learn about the circumstances of the victims' final days and possibly uncover clues about the cause of their deterioration. Diana's story about Sarah was similar to her account of Sean's death. She went to church with the other girls on that fateful day, and when she returned, she noticed her eldest daughter was in bad shape. Prior to this, Sarah had suffered from similar symptoms as her brother and father, but in milder form. Therefore, the storyteller didn't panic and didn't seek medical help. The woman thought no one could help her anyway. When Diana returned home and found her daughter in critical condition, she first wondered if Sarah had attempted suicide. Sarah suffered from bipolar disorder and might have harmed herself. Her mother reviewed all the medications the girl had access to and repeatedly claimed that her daughter wanted to end her life. Repeatedly, similar incidents had occurred when Sarah cut her wrists. Everything sounded like the woman was insistently trying to convince the police of her version. Diana wasn't told about the parallel investigation into Mark's and Sean's deaths, although their passing was now considered suspicious. Investigators didn't want to spook the potential murderer. Sarah remained in the hospital as doctors continued searching for toxins. During this meeting at the police station, Diana behaved strangely. While answering questions, she began recounting how Sarah was a difficult child, unable to find a job recently, and performed poorly in school. At the same time, tuition fees were high, and her revelations sounded like justification for some action. This seemed strange because one wouldn't usually think about such things while their daughter was dying in the hospital. Then the main suspect began discussing her dislike for her husband, who barely worked and spent all his free time on entertainment. The detectives simply listened as confessions poured out one after another. Diana admitted she always considered Sarah problematic. Due to her bipolar disorder, the girl continued living with the family and had no plans to move out. The mother admitted she had long hoped the girl would take her own life. Now the woman was convinced it had happened. Diana reiterated several times that she hadn't harmed her loved ones. Eventually, under pressure from the detectives, she unexpectedly confessed. The widow informed the detectives that her husband and children drank antifreeze. This clarified everything, as poisoning with this substance is indeed very dangerous. It has symptoms resembling various chemical compounds, complicating its detection. It causes a slow, agonizing death. The woman admitted she drank antifreeze herself, claiming she saw her family doing it for some reason. Of course, the detectives didn't believe these absurd stories. Suspicions were quickly confirmed when they checked the search history in the woman's browser. It turned out that long before her husband's death, she had begun searching for information about poisoning signs and methods, including antifreeze. She clearly chose the most effective and discreet means of murder. She explored various drugs, minerals, and essential oils that suppress the body. She didn't hesitate in her wording, so some searches were very provocative. For example, how to kill my husband, or how do people with bipolar disorder kill themselves? All this indicated planning murders long before her husband's death. When confronted with this during a follow-up meeting, Diana denied guilt, but broke under the pressure of the detectives. The suspect admitted the death of her husband didn't happen as initially described. When the seizure occurred, the woman ensured there were no signs of life, then waited 5 more minutes to ensure Mark wouldn't be saved. According to Diana's confession, she did this because she hated her husband. Everyone described the man as kind and bright, likely causing hatred due to their approach to the family budget. Diana simply couldn't handle the workload at work, being the primary breadwinner, but never received help from her husband. She harbored the same hatred toward her son, Sean. She couldn't stand looking at him, considering him a major problem for the family. Instead of seeking understanding and warmth from his mother, The boy merely sought solace each time she drove him out of the room whenever he entered. Moreover, Sean began suspecting something after researching his father's illness. When Mark died, she realized she wouldn't tolerate her sick son anymore. Therefore, she began adding antifreeze to his drinks daily. It took just a few days to reach a lethal dose in his system, according to the woman. But this was a lie. The boy suffered agonizingly for over a week before finally passing away. Now her attention and dissatisfaction focused on her eldest daughter. In the mother's opinion, the girl had become the family's main problem. She wasted too much money on education, but was bound to fail due to her lack of talent. The girl dreamed of becoming a French translator. She took out a student loan and soon after graduating, needed to repay it, but had no job prospects. The mother refused to pay her debts. Diana hated Sarah for not finding a job and resolving her financial issues independently. 4 days before the girl was hospitalized, her mother began adding antifreeze to her food. At the police station, she admitted she sent her daughter to the hospital so quickly because she couldn't bear witnessing her suffering anymore. Naturally, the woman felt no compassion. The story about trying to kill painlessly turned out to be fantasy. In reality, she prepared drinks that were nearly half antifreeze. Experts calculated that a single bottle could kill up to 30 people at once. All this was stored in the refrigerator, methodically poisoning her family. This was alarming, especially given the presence of 2 other daughters in the house, including Brianna, who was only 12. Still, the mother wasn't afraid that the youngest daughter might accidentally drink it, as her plan already included her murder immediately after Sarah's death. However, physical evidence was needed to convict the woman. Despite the cremation of her husband and son, fragments of Mark and Sean's remains could still be examined after autopsy. Detectives proposed examining them to see if the deadly substance left traces in their systems. Tests revealed the presence of ethylene glycol, one of the main components of antifreeze. Before arresting the poisoner, the police decided to check if she had an accomplice, as it was difficult to execute the plan alone. It was hard to imagine keeping everyone in the dark about her intentions. Without revealing their suspicions to Diana, they simply arrested her and summoned her other daughter, 22-year-old Rachel, for questioning. When told her mother confessed to poisoning the family, Rachel's behavior changed dramatically. She became visibly nervous, clearly knowing more than she admitted. The detectives just wanted to talk to her to understand what was happening at home. Even before Diana's confession, Rachel had acted strangely, laughing inappropriately and joking despite discussing the deaths of relatives, but she denied everything. When suspicions arose, the police decided to test their assumptions and conducted repeated searches of the house. They found Rachel's diary, which became a valuable source of information, revealing the full extent of the evil deeds. A curious entry mentioned that soon her father, and then her brother, would die. She calmed herself with thoughts of inheriting money and her father's car. Most troubling was that the entry was written 10 months before Mark's death, clearly indicating Rachel was aware of her mother's terrifying plans and didn't try to stop or warn anyone. Apparently, it suited her that her entire family would soon die. When shown the diary, Rachel was clearly unprepared for this twist. She quickly broke down and confessed she had been her mother's accomplice from the start. The collaboration began when the daughter helped Diana research methods and poisons online. They discovered that store-bought antifreeze contained a bitter component, preventing accidental ingestion, making it unsuitable for poisoning, so they purchased it online. In executing their sinister plan, the woman prepared poisoned food and drinks, which the daughter delivered to her father, brother, and even sister. According to her confession, they poisoned each family member up to 3 times a day. The idea of using antifreeze was Rachel's suggestion. According to the accomplice, she had the best relationship with her mother among all family members, and Rachel was always the favorite daughter. Like Diana, she disliked the others, considering them burdens, so both decided to eliminate them and start a new life together. Acquaintances of the Staudt family were stunned when Rachel posted on her social media a month after her brother's death. "I think I haven't seen Mom so relaxed in a long time." It seemed they were satisfied with the outcome. Rachel admitted they discussed each murder in detail. Both agreed Mark should die, but regarding Sean, Rachel was unsure. She thought placing him in a specialized institution permanently would suffice. Rachel even argued with her mother about Sean, as she didn't want him dead, but later agreed it would be better to eliminate him. Of course, she referenced feeling controlled by Diana, but the fact that she argued raised doubts about total control. It appeared to be equal participation by mother and daughter in planning the poisoning of their loved ones. Rachel revealed that poisoning Sarah came as a surprise to her. She believed the primary reason wasn't the girl's debts, but a simple argument. Sarah and her mother constantly clashed. Diana considered her extremely irritating. As for 12-year-old Brianna, Rachel gave vague comments. According to her, the teenager was also seen as a burden, so the youngest family member was also intended to be eliminated. Finally, Diana was informed of her daughter's confession and asked to tell the truth for accuracy, as lying further was pointless. She complied. According to the widow, her hatred for her husband began because he didn't attract her. Additionally, his extravagance and complete inability to support the family irritated her. She accused him of verbal and physical abuse and domestic violence. Nevertheless, none of the people familiar with the deceased confirmed these claims. Even Rachel's diary noted that the father was a model family man who would harm himself before harming anyone else. Despite Rachel and Diana continuing to cite feelings of resentment, detectives believed the motive for the murders was more mundane. Specifically, life insurance policies were taken out on each family member. The widow used the payout after her husband's death to buy a newer, larger home. This was just the beginning of their sinister plan. Life insurance was also taken out on Sean and Sarah, which she planned to collect. Rachel's diary detailed her reflections on the events, thoroughly studied for use in court. Finally, Diana admitted why Sarah was taken to the hospital, unlike the other two victims. Apparently, Rachel simply didn't want another death in the new house. It wasn't that they cared about Sarah's survival, they simply viewed a dying relative as a burden, just like everyone else. Rachel sincerely excused this behavior. She recounted numerous regrets related to her deceased brother. The image of him lying on the floor with blood pooling from his mouth, cold pale hands and glassy eyes was etched in her memory. After moving into his room, she repeatedly wrote in her diary about her anxious state during this period. She had recurring nightmares where Sean appeared. Rachel and Diana were arrested and charged with first-degree murders. No bail was granted. The Lutheran church, which the Staudt family attended, wrote a letter of support during this difficult time on behalf of all parishioners. Despite the pastor himself reporting his suspicions to the police, he initiated this letter and prayed for their souls. Rachel pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against her mother. She took responsibility for 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempted second-degree murder. In total, she received 2 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 42 years. This means she will be eligible for release in 2055 at the age of 64. At sentencing, she apologized to her sister Sarah, who survived the poisoning, relearned to walk and speak, and underwent prolonged rehabilitation. Later, Rachel petitioned for a reduced sentence, demanding a retrial, citing fear of her male attorney. She claimed she was intimidated by him and forced to give these confessions. Additionally, she argued that no psychiatric evaluation was conducted. Rachel began insisting she had mental health issues. Ultimately, this appeal was rejected in 2018, and she made no further attempts to lighten her punishment. Diana Staudt was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Until the end, she used vague language, refusing to fully admit guilt. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In one of her last interviews, Diana insisted she wasn't involved in her husband's death and blamed it on his addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Allegedly, he associated with dangerous people and suffered as a result. At that moment, the woman was so tired of her husband and hated him so much that she didn't intend to help him. When Mark died, it was a relief for her. No evidence of Mark's addiction was found. This new version contradicted the diary entries and Rachel's testimony, so no one believed her. Sarah's life would never be the same. She never fully recovered from the severe poisoning and lives in a special center with a guardian. The girl dreams of her deceased father and brother and believes they, as guardian angels, watch over her. Sarah forgave her mother and sister and doesn't hold a grudge against them due to her faith. She is a devout Christian and spends a lot of time in church. The girl hopes to fulfill her dream of becoming a French translator and visiting Paris. If you like my work, subscribe to the channel, support the video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.